Hey guys, and welcome to the very delayed 5th episode of Memetaa TV. I do apologize about my absence for the past 3 months. Before the combo video, I think in January, I was a little busy because of the holidays, but after that I was generally on a free schedule and I was just lazy. And a lot of it was because I was trying to do the 1.04 patch video, which in the end I decided just not to do, and I just kept the translation up on my blog, which I put the link to that in the comment section, so if you haven't read any of the changes or were unaware of certain changes, go ahead and look at those, because I do have the full system change list as well as the full character change list for you guys to read. But I will not be doing a video for that, so I apologize if anybody wanted one. But if you have any questions about anything on there, just feel free to contact me and I will be able to explain it, because I spent a lot of time doing that. Other than that, it's just back to the same old. I didn't know, but I heard recently that the American release is going to be out at the end of April, which obviously is just a month away. So I'm going to do my best to get up as many tutorials as I can before that time. So hopefully I'll be able to start character tutorials by the time the game is actually out for Western audiences. Other than that, it's back to the basics though for the meantime, and today is going to cover movement, which I know sounds really boring, but just like any game, movement's a fundamental that you kind of have to learn, and even though movement is pretty simple in ASB, you do have to kind of learn what your options are and what situations each one is practical in. So from the get-go, there's simple forward and backward movement, which of course forward walks, which is holding forward, and back walk, which is holding back on your stick, whatever you have. As you can see, walk speed is pretty atrocious, but just remember that this is your safest option, and in the terms of you not having any life, where every other option would kind of put you at risk, this is the one way that you can go quickly into a guard stance without having to worry. In terms of your fastest movement option, at least for approaching, there are forward steps, which since 1.02 you can actually cancel these into one another if you just smash it. But obviously if you do that, you're wide open because you can't guard or you can't cancel, and you do have recovery frames after a forward step. So just remember that. But at the beginning of a match, or in a case where your opponent is just letting you come at them, multiple forward steps is pretty much the fastest way you're going to get to them. The other option you have to approach for if you don't want to do that, and this is technically safer, is a forward run, which is just the same as a forward step, but on the second hitting forward, you just hold like that. So forward step motion, so one, then the second time just hold. This is actually safe because from a forward run you can actually cancel right into back movement, so that means you go right back into guard. Or if you are like this, you can also cancel into an attack. So that's pretty much the advantage, is where forward steps you have the recovery at the end of it and you're pretty vulnerable during it. If you just take the time to go into a forward run, which isn't necessarily as fast, but it's still pretty quick for a lot of characters, you technically get the advantage of being able to go back into guard, or, if you're really close, then you obviously can throw out an attack. And I believe you can actually go into, steps from forward runs as well, so you can also sidestep. But the other actual use for this is, I'm really bad at doing this. Okay, there it was. At the very beginning of your run, once it activates, you can, throw an attack like that. And this is actually used for combos for a few characters. I believe Diavolo is one of the most infamous users of it. But if you do a normal forward step, sometimes it can take a while for the actual attack because of the cancel to come out. I think it's because Whole Horse is pretty quick. His is maybe not as noticeable, but you actually will use this sometimes for combos to go into forward run for a short moment instead of letting the full forward step just come out because of the recovery. So just it'll depend on your character whether or not you use this technique, but it does exist for certain characters. Other than that, for types of retreating, there's of course backsteps like any other game. I used to think backsteps were a little more useless. I don't know if they got changed or if they were made a little faster than they were in the original build, but for some reason now they feel a lot better. So they kind of work like backsteps in any other game. They don't have any invulnerability at any time, so I mean, if you're doing a stupid backstep then you will get hit, and obviously you can't do anything against projectiles via this, but just know that they're, depending on your character, they can be pretty quick, and they do cover some pretty decent distance, so you can get away from most attacks. And say someone like Jotaro you see throwing out like really slow attack like that, you can easily react and backstep out of the way if you for some reason don't want to do this. But there's that. But generally, if you know your distances and know your backstep speed, you can use them effectively, and they'll get you away from most close proximity attacks. But I believe there are some, like... I thought Jotaro's was nicking my backstep earlier, but maybe not. So yeah, depending on your character, they can actually be pretty good. The other form of retreating movement, which is pretty limited, is back runs, which are technically the same as forward dashes. I believe the only characters with them, off the top of my head, that I know are Whole Horse, Young Joseph, and Old Joseph. So only about like 3 characters that actually get access to them, but they actually do work like a special move, so you can't cancel them to anything, as you can see. And you also aren't guarding this time, because it is counted as a move, so you do have to release back and then hold back again just to get your guard out. So I mean, they're not the best, but you know, they are pretty quick, and they're a good way, especially for Whole Horse, to get quick distance. Then, you know, say you're trying to do multiple backsteps, well, it'll probably come out anyway, but if you're doing multiple backsteps, rather, it's probably better just do a back run like this, and you can get distance, so you can start your range game. Which, obviously, for most characters that have them, it's because they have range attacks that, you know, getting away will allow them use. Last thing in terms of 2D movement is jumps. I already talked a lot about jumps in terms of attacking, I guess, in the previous tutorial, I believe it was. So I'm just going to talk about them in terms of trying to get around movement-wise. Depending on your character, again, your jump arcs and your speed will be a little different. Whole Horse is kind of shitty, Jotaro's actually pretty good. But in this situation, just remember that you can't guard in the air, so this is completely unsafe, and for a little while, even as you hit the ground, because they did add some, like 1 frame of vulnerability when you hit the ground on an empty jump, but it does exist, so you can't guard immediately once you hit the ground. And also remember, you're not recovering guard gauge while you're in the air, so in case that you are suffering from a lot of rushdown and you have like no guard gauge, then jumping also does put you at the risk of you're not going to be recovering guard gauge until you know, stay put on the ground for a while. So as far as approaching jumps go, there are projectiles that can actually home into you while you're jumping like this, so you have to be careful. As well as just in general, I mean, you're completely vulnerable until you hit the ground, unless you like throw out an attack, but then you do have to worry about even more recovery frames when you hit the ground. So as far as approaching, you know, obviously you have better ways to approach an opponent than jumping, and, you know, in terms of projectiles, I'm going to talk about sidesteps soon, which are obviously infinitely better for just avoiding projectiles and approaching than jumping over them. As far as retreating jumps, you know, say you get knocked down, obviously retreating jumps on wake up are a valid option because they will get you out of throws and certain unblockable setups, you know, you won't have to deal with them as much, but you can, you know, obviously get smacked in the air like that. It obviously won't count as a counter hit as long as you don't throw an attack, and sometimes, like in that case, I was trying to jump, but you can get knocked out right before the jump starts and then you'll eat a full combo. So you do have to be careful when you use them, and if you're abusing them, then chances are your opponent will easily just scout it out, and if they or a character like maybe Diavolo, or trying to think of somebody else who's really scary. Whole Horse is pretty bad to jump stupidly on. There are quite a few characters that can really punish you if you are jumping too often. So, I mean, there are characters like that can't do anything about it for the life of them, but as far as most of the top tier characters, they can. So it's a really unwise decision to abuse it too much. So that's about all I'll say about that. As for the last section, Sidesteps, which is the only form of like actual 3D movement I want to talk about, because they are a huge part in your movement game, more so than anything else I've talked about. From the get-go, obviously they're the safest way to dodge projectiles, and quite a few. Like, if you're fighting a Whole Horse, a lot of people don't use these enough to actually get around to stuff, and just end up eating a lot of damage because of it. But, you know, none of his stuff and a lot of characters, their projectiles don't track across the axis, but there are quite a few. Caesar, Kira, Johnny really bad, and Kakuin have projectiles that can all track you across the axis, which you should be aware of. And you know, you'll see them, and you'll learn them as you see them. But most characters, like their quick projectiles, they won't track you. So mostly slow projectiles or slow to start up projectiles will track you, but the majority won't. So you can easily sidestep to get out of their way. And you know, say you have an opponent that's just trying to, you know, space you out like that. If you just, you know, dodge it and then, you know, slowly approach, you know, just alternate forward movement and sidesteps, you'll get to them eventually, and they'll have to figure out something. So don't worry too much about that. And there are also like characters that can set traps like this. So Whole Horse will do stuff like that. But you can easily sidestep, and then the trap becomes irrelevant. Well, not completely irrelevant, depending on where they are. But it's the easiest way to get around stuff, you know, on the ground that's blocking your path towards your opponent. This was also something that was added in the 1.02 patch, but there's something called like a quick sidestep, which a lot of people don't know about. If you're, say, holding 4 or 6, so forward or back, and you hit sidestep, you'll actually get out of sidestep a lot faster. You know, I mean, it doesn't look all that fast, but here, I'll try and show you. So that's like a normal sidestep speed. That's how quick you can get out multiple. And I'll try and show you with quick. So as you see, they're coming out a lot faster. And like the only difference happening here is, say you're holding 6 or holding 4. If you hold 6, you're slowly going to move forward. If you hold 4, well, I guess as long as your back is not at the wall. If you're holding 4 or back, you're going to slowly move backwards. That's about it. They are a little practical because if you need to do multiple sidesteps in a row, a lot of characters have really quick sides, can actually do it pretty quick. So if you need to do multiples in a row, that's the way to do it. Just remember, it can't be done with forward, like, you know, moving towards the screen. These, you know, since you have to hold down, there's no actual way to like cancel them and make them quicker. So it only works with back steps, or back side steps. And forward, you just have to do slowly and normally. But they're not all that slow, so. As far as anything else, just remember, sidesteps are great for the distance game, but when you're at your opponent's side, you know, sidestepping is actually a bad idea because, as you can see here, it doesn't look like this attack. Okay, now it's not hitting. It doesn't look like Jotaro's knee should be hitting at times. Like, yeah, like that. And then there are times he'll, like that was a throw. Obviously you saw he throw me from like completely odd angle. Like that. So as you can see, they're kind of a bad idea in close quarters because they're really vulnerable. But as far as you're just using them to avoid projectiles, you'll be fine. The other thing you have to remember is not all attacks can be avoided with one sidestep, which is the kind of why you use that quick sidestep I was talking about. But say like this move, Jotaro's move, like say someone's spamming that and you want to get around it. If you just try one sidestep, oh shoot. It was doing this earlier successfully. As you can see, I sidestep once. Let me try and show you one more time. Ah. No, I'm not going to be able to do it again. Okay, well, I only showed it off one time, but there are certain attacks that actually hit like... Okay, there, I got it again somehow. They actually hit like kind of like a funnel shape, since this is sort of a pseudo 3D game, even though it's mostly played as a 2D fighter. They do kind of hit like a funnel outwards, so if you only sidestep once, say, there's a high chance you might actually not completely get out of its range, and you'll actually get hit by it if you try and approach off just that one sidestep. So it's sometimes safer if you see an attack like that, just sidestep twice if you're going to try and use that technique to get around it or to punish it. And there are attacks like, say this trap, say you're even here, it does kind of track you to where you are. Let's just do it once. So, say it's at your side like that, it will still hit you, so you kind of have to, you know, like say if you were Jotaro and you saw the trap there, you'd want to go like, you know, this distance, because, or even here, because you're a lot safer from it. So, you know, just use multiple sidesteps in the case that you know these attacks that actually, you know, look for where your position on the screen. Or, you know, say you're trying to get away from something like these kinds of moves that you know kind of hit outwards. Usually using multiple sidesteps will save you. Other than that, the big use for sidesteps outside of that is just you're going to be using it a lot against characters like Whole Horse who have traps and projectiles. Just as like they're going to be using them and you're going to be using them, because say you sidestep, or okay, say you sidestep to avoid this trap, he can also sidestep downwards to cause you to do that, and, you know, just make the trap relevant again. So you'll probably be fighting across axes like this a lot against certain characters, just because of what moves they have. And also another way you can use them is, say you want to force someone to fight you in a certain way, or you don't want them to be able to use a certain kind of movement, you can try and move them towards the wall, because as you can see, you can't sidestep past the wall. So at a certain point you guys will get stuck, and you can only sidestep in one direction. So that's another thing you can do. Like, this is a good way to prevent people from abusing quick sidestep if you want to. Say you're a Whole Horse player or some other projectile player. If you want to limit the opponent's ability to quick sidestep, if you get the wall to your back, like the back of the screen like this, suddenly, you know, quick sidestep is useless and they have to use normal, slow sidesteps. But that's about it. A lot longer than I thought it would go, but it's because I tried to cover a lot of movement. Next tutorial, I believe I planned was going to be defensive stuff, so I'm going to talk about the 4 attack types, how to defend, and I'm going to talk about stylish moves, which is the Just Guard in this game. And that'll be about it. So as always, rate, comment, subscribe, and again, if you have any questions, just feel free to contact me on Twitter, or put it in the comments or something, and I will respond. But until then, guys, thanks for watching.